Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Yes! Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
Only on WESN. Content Capital.
Remember waking up early just to catch your favorite cartoons? WESN brings back those magical mornings with Retro Saturdays.
Thus, the Powerpuff Girls were born!
Where the young at heart relive the fun. Join us every Saturday from 8 a.m. to 12 noon, only on WESN, the content capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
As always, we appreciate you starting your day with us. Let's get into this morning's first conversation.
Is the country's healthcare system more at risk more than ever?
Why it has remained unaddressed for so long.
Political parties get lots of cash, big cash from financiers, and then when they get that now, you can't account for it.
But it's really the specialist nurses who we are in a greater shortfall for.
We can tap into the resources and have them, at least form some mentorship programs.
Highlight our food systems, and which will attract persons from all over the world to come and experience something that actually supports the local economy.
We're lucky that we have a vibrant legal system that allows change to take place, and it's not that matters are just swept under the carpet and discrimination is allowed to be perpetrated.
A lot of people don't know that there were attempts to ban the carnival, suppress the carnival.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
You don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
WESN.
In a previous situation, I stated my disappointment. That is to say, with regards to one Stuart Young and his hot mic incident. While I have been told, and to some extent I knew, that such things were more than likely or to be more commonplace than we would necessarily hear about directly, have on recordings. It was still disappointing because sometimes, regardless of what reality is, perception is reality, and it's best not to let the public know how the hot dog is made because they might stop buying hot dogs. Don't let the public know what happens outside of the public view because it might not look good. As bad as it seems when you go into the comment section of political videos and posts, you don't necessarily want to hear politicians repeat things or say things that normally, at least in the public view, would be limited to various commenters and maybe a few bloggers with regards to how low they could go when speaking about political opponents. Of course, then Minister Young had a statement that is believed to be directed at the Prime Minister. It was crass, but in a way it didn't have quite the same. Well, it was almost meant as a throwaway joke, kind of like bullying as opposed to just outright insulting, if that makes sense. Still very derogatory, and the implications of it being said in Parliament was highly disappointing because one of the signs of intelligence is the capacity to debate issues on their merits as opposed to needing to attack someone's individual persona, which technically, unless there's some direct connection, usually it's not relevant to whatever is being debated. At the end of the day, the source of the information or the perspective is not always relevant to debating what is presented, the argument being made. And more importantly, that's what needs to be defeated if it's a bad idea. Because if we rely on debating the individuals and not the actual points, then many good ideas will fall by the wayside because we're more concerned about keeping up appearances than actually debating relevant issues that matter. It makes the most recent hot mic incident, in comparison, puzzling in a way because it seemingly was directed by a member of the government bench to another member of the government bench, the motivations of which we can't necessarily know per se. What was said before? Was there anything that triggered this response? Why was this done? Whereas with regards to Stuart Young's hot mic incident, it's a lot more obvious. Everyone will have their opinions with regards to this one, but with the previous hot mic incident, it was attacking one's political opponent. Because it was a little less obvious to me certain things, I didn't necessarily want to speak about it, which perhaps was a mistake. At the end of the day, Attorney General John Jeremy is not in a dissimilar position in that there was a certain reputation and then expectations going into the situation. Stuart Young had a certain reputation, and that reputation gave him certain expectations, which arguably in various ways he did not live up to in the latter parts of the second term of the PNM. And with regards to Attorney General John Jeremy, being presented as an outsider to UNC, someone that has faith in UNC's mission, someone that is as much as a willing collaborator in trying to bring the country together, doesn't necessarily have the same type of political baggage as his peers, has a different point of origin, someone who has a certain degree of education, a certain level of experience, and you would have thought a certain level of professionalism. And this is the thing. Obviously, what he said was not meant for public ears. Unfortunately, he was a little bit too careless with regards to saying certain things in what is technically a public forum, and there's always the risk that the mics are on. At the end of the day, him having to go low in whatever argument he was having, while not directed at a political opponent, at least an external political opponent, at the end of the day, it's never a good sign. Not to say that he is any less capable of doing his job. There's the implications of why he said it in the first place, what the motivation was. Is that sign of internal division. But then also, on some level, you just don't want to see the process of how the hot dog is made. We want our leaders to be capable. And ideally, you want your leaders to be better than you. Why would I want to be led by someone who is not as good as me, who is not as smart as me, right? Or more importantly, to put it in a different way that sounds less arrogant, if I'm the most intelligent guy in the room, we're in trouble. I'm not supposed to be the most intelligent guy in the room. That would be a bad thing. They're supposed to be far more intelligent people than me. Am I capable of running a country? I would say no, because that is a job that is so tall, so demanding, that means so much, that carries such a heavy duty of responsibility. For most of us, we should be thinking, this thing requires someone with much more of the right stuff than what we have. It requires the best of us. And the last thing we need to see is someone showing a side of themselves that does not reflect that they qualify as the best of us. Because it's not just about intelligence. Governance is going to have a lot of hard decisions. One of the issues I think the current administration is having is, so they're trying to perhaps redistribute resources, and it could be in a more equitable way, but the appearance is that they're taking away from certain areas of the country that looks somewhat one-sided. Now, we don't necessarily have enough statistical analysis to do enough of a comparative analysis and then to be able to potentially eliminate other variables in order to say for certain scientifically what's going on. Are we seeing biases in governance or not? And it's very easy when you are a third party looking at what the decision makers are doing to question the motivations of each decision. That's one of the reasons why transparency is so important. I'm not going to go down that rant. That's one of the reasons why the lack of transparency is disappointing, and try as they might, the current administration is not necessarily doing a good enough job, hence why people look at them suspiciously. So, the last thing you need now is one of the individuals who potentially looks as though he is standing with one leg on each side of the line could be a focal point for bridge building is part of some level of maybe personal but internal strife. As one report puts it, it remains unclear to whom the comment was directed. Technically, there are rumors and speculations as to who it was directed. I don't think there's enough to say on the record in the court of law this, that, and the other was the case. So I'm fine with the reporting like that. Was the remark bigoted, homophobic? It has now led to the opposition seeking to file a privilege motion, right, for offensive comments. Although I would argue, should you go down that road, the precedent was set with regards to how they handled the Stuart Young matter. Despite the then Speaker of the House's strong chastising of Stuart Young, the Deputy Speaker had to oversee the proceedings with regards to his apology. And this goes back to what a former speaker says about insincere apologies. Was Stuart Young's apology insincere? Now, however, the precedent is set. The question is, what will the government do? Will they try to show that they are more than the PNM? But to what extent can we hold them to a higher standard and say that's fair? We want them to be of a higher standard, but to say that they have to. At some point, we stop complaining about the Stuart Young hot mic incident. To say now that we're going to hold the UNC to some higher standard arbitrarily is unfair. If we want them to be better and that's how we want it to be framed, that's fine. But if we want to just say, nah, what you're doing is not good enough, well, what was accepted once has to be accepted again. The question is, to what degree can and will the Attorney General, if it is so determined, be willing to make a public apology? And will that apology be sincere enough if he doesn't necessarily speak to the details of the incident? Because who will he be apologizing to will be one of the questions that a lot of the people who either are UNC opponents or just love the drama will have at the forefront of their mind. And just notice, going back to what I said, we hope for the best and brightest, not just the smartest, but those with the best judgment, wisdom and understanding, comprehension, those with the best motivations, with the most consideration for the most number of our population to try and determine fairly what are the priorities in the moment. What are the needs for the whole, for the overall country? What is important? What is not as important at times? And then how to communicate that. It's a large amount of high-end skills, high-end leadership skills, which generally speaking, it's difficult to determine who actually has it and who doesn't. And one of the last things you then want are negative public utterances. Because while it doesn't necessarily mean that the person is incapable, it is a sign. It is a sign that potentially they are not, and more importantly, it is an eroding factor. A factor that erodes confidence and trust. Because at the end of the day, once you get to a certain level, all it takes is one bad mistake, and you can do serious harm to people's livelihoods. It's why CEOs, they don't have a lot of leeway to make major mistakes. You make a major mistake as a CEO, you are liable to get removed. And that can potentially lead to instability. It all depends on the motivations as to why you do certain things. In business, with the profit motive, it has a strong enough motivating factor to override certain other agendas, some of the time at least. But our political environment doesn't seem to have that strong requirement that says, hey, productivity at some point has to be favored because we ain't in the business of losing money. But when it comes to governance, we have allowed too much excesses over the last 60 years, multiple administrations, mostly PNM, but some UNC. And people might not, the situation has gone viral, but dare I say it has potentially, it will resonate for the wrong reasons. I don't care about this being ammunition to be used to deride the government. Where it is pertinent to make complaints and to criticize, it's fine. But at the end of the day, constructive criticism is not necessarily meant to break people down. At the end of the day, I was not calling for Stuart Young to be removed from Parliament or anything like that, and I wouldn't say the same, I would not say anything like that with regards to the Attorney General. But I will always come back to the fact that we did not vote in the PNM replacement that is basically just meant to be a side grade. We wanted an upgrade. And then, of course, here's the thing. While a lot of UNC and pro-government supporters will be very defensive on the matter, I think at the end of the day, the real issue is not what your political opponents say about the Attorney General or about the minister that is alleged to be the target of the statements, but rather coming back to the why this happened in the first place. Because as much as I and people in the middle, political opponents are just going to be negative. But the people in the middle, the people who are not diehard opponents of the current administration might say, we wanted something better. That should be something that the members of the UNC should also be saying. Not to say we wanted something better to so sack everybody and replace them, but saying we wanted something better, so please do not do things like this, because it undermines your own credibility. The personas that you craft when you speak to the public in irregular fashion is pulled down by these unfortunate moments of human feeling. Common human feeling, normal human feeling, at times understandable human feeling, but our leaders, dare I say, we want them to be more than just the average human, maybe even more than human. At least we want the persona to be more than human. Think about all of the great men and women in history and how much larger than life they were. At the end of the day, they were still just men and women like anybody else. But they operated in a way, they crafted a version of themselves, they presented a version of themselves that made them seem more than, that inspired generations, that still inspire generations to come, that then now instill the confidence when they say, follow me, they were followed. And there are still people who would be more than willing to follow now, even long after they're gone. And the legacy of our politics is that, ultimately speaking, do we have anybody within the halls of Parliament, past or present, that long after they're gone, if they say, follow me, they will be universally followed? And maybe that's asking too much, but these times seem to be a little bit more challenging than times before. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm a prisoner of the moment. Maybe people back in the 70s and 80s might say, hold the phone, you didn't know what challenge is. The kind of economic struggles we had then. But the challenge might not be what the population is going through, but rather what the government is supposed to be doing in order to prevent us from going down that path again. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll welcome the good lady. Stay tuned. This is Talking About WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College.
Merry Christmas.
First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded big ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also nationwide at Mart's Liquor Palace, Diego Martin Main Road, Shamir, Uncle Beto, Santa Cruz, Better Deal Supermarket, Cunupia, and Aranguez, Khan's Liquor, Diego Martin Main Road, Ramsing Sports, Chaguanas and Cuba, Bobby's Barbecue Wrap, Mirage Supermarket, Sangre Grande, West B Supermarket, Diego Martin and Tacarigua, Sio's Bar, San Fernando, Payless Hardware, Diego Martin Main Road, Dodge Roti, Pitti Valley, Mirage Westside Arima, Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police, also at islandetickets.com. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1082. Queens Royal College, 3-car raffle.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town! Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him! I know him!
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
All right, the good lady has not reached yet, so that gives me an opportunity to course correct on a story because, of course, from the very beginning, I have been monitoring, as you probably know if you've watched enough episodes, since the elections, the situation between the PSA, the government, and future wage negotiations. There was a report that a 10% offer was made. However, Now there are news reports, at least to Guardian Media, that the intention to commence negotiation was what was presented, and it was not a formal offer. Regardless, it does now lead to the point where former Minister of Finance, Com Imbert, is pointing out what might be the obvious, but could be something that's far more pertinent than some people might think, in that, in his opinion, government would need to go back to Parliament to essentially pass whatever needs to be passed, amendments to the budget or changes to authorize allocations in order to get the money to pay the PSA, because the Minister of Finance most famously said, well, I didn't budget anything for it because I don't know what it's going to be. It could be 10%, it could be 5%, it could be 0%. And I don't know if this is MP Imbert's intention, but it does indirectly or subtly bring attention back to the Ministers of Finance statements that he did not budget anything for the wage negotiations, something which was a campaign promise. Now, it's a campaign promise that I didn't necessarily like, because I didn't like the idea of setting such a high bar for financial commitment when you don't know if you could meet said financial commitment, right? Now, if you want to assume that the PNM are just all liars, and you want to assume that everything they did with regards to wage negotiation was done in bad faith, then, okay, fine. If that's your starting point, I could see where you want to be a bit confident that you could give 10%. But it seems as though reality kind of hit the government in the face, unfortunately. It was somewhat interesting to see the emotional, visceral reactions of the Prime Minister in that first post-cabinet meeting at the Red House. And it made me think, all right, at least they're not going to try to pretend everything is fine and there's nothing to see here and pull the wool over our eyes while they do some kind of cockamamie scheme in the background to fix things. Because in part, you make a campaign promise, it's a hell of a thing to not follow through. And now we've reached the point where, because here's the thing, it was reported that they were offered 10%. Now, sources are saying, that is to say, Guardian said they were reliably informed. So sources are saying that no, there was no 10% offer. And what is it with all of the games and maneuvering? And who reported the 10%? Was it the union? Was it someone in the government? Was it someone in the office of the chief personnel officer? Who benefits from that? Why was it reported? Was it the media that made an assumption, perhaps? A misrepresentation or misreading of documentation or communications? And now part of the question is, what is the union's response to the fact that it seems as though now there's a report that says publicly they were presented with the intention to begin negotiations, not with a formal offer, because the PSA wants to get back pay by Christmas, which would be nice, but I don't know if it's something that they should have been banking on. Now, this coincides with the fact that, and one of the issues that makes it more complex, that third-party observers have more or less already put forward, what about the other unions now that want to come back and say, no, we want 10%? What makes this interesting is if you look back, the 10% offer or starting point, I believe, was initially presented by the head of the PSA, not by a member of the UNC. Now, she did it on their platform. But it begs the question, why was it done that way? Why does it seem as though in this whole situation, the communication seems just off enough that it leaves me with questions? It might not leave you with questions. But it makes me wonder, did the UNC even want to say 10% as a starting point? was that the PSA's price for their support. And it sounds bad, but I actually don't mean it to sound bad, right? I'm just being very matter of fact here. I actually, on a technical level, have no issue if that's the case. Because you could say it in a nicer way, but that's essentially what happened. The PSA wanted something. The government made a promise. They were happy with the promises, with the government's position on things. That is one of the major things. So they supported the current government's political party in the last election. So is this something that the PSA kind of pushed? And maybe now the UNC, the current administration, is saying, maybe we gave in too easily. Because if it was the case where they're going to get the 10% straight up, there's no need for any of this. Even if they got the 10%, one of the things that I was prepared to say at the start of the week or late last week that I didn't get a chance to say, and now it's obsolete, even if they did get the 10% offer straight up now, the whole lead up where the PSA is disgruntled and airs their grievances out in the public was so unnecessary. And it wasn't necessarily all their fault that they did that. So what is going on? Because we already are in a situation where there are questions with regards to the motivations and execution of certain things like the dissolution of CPEP and URP and the firing of certain workers in various entities in the public service or state-owned entities. We already have those questions. The last thing that we were also expecting is questions with regards to negotiations with unions who should have a decent understanding with the current administration, decent lines of communications. They were allies after all. Is our labor situation in the country at risk of getting messier? Let's not forget, we have 2 or 3 former union heads. I think one of them was a divisional head. I could be wrong. But Clyde Elder was the head of the Communication Workers Union, and Leroy Batiste is the former head of the PSA. And he's the Minister of Labor, if my memory serves correct. This is one of the reasons why I did not appreciate Dave Skanku saying the lines promises made, promises kept all throughout the budget. Not because I didn't like the guy and I didn't like that he was saying it, but because it sets up expectations where if you cannot follow through for very practical and reasonable reasons, you set yourself up to look like a failure. And this is one of the big campaign promises, which I said I understand why they would want to try and keep it. But I didn't necessarily think that it was practical. Now that we're seeing signs that it might not be practical, I'm not rejoicing. This is not a moment to say, see, I was right. I mean, it's not proven that I was right, first of all, right? We don't know what the end result would be. It's not so simple to say, you see, they don't have the money. They don't have the money, I was right. Let's not make it that simplistic. Because I actually don't like this, because now it shows a potential breakdown in pre-existing relationships, which again would have been avenues for bridge building, although one could argue, would it be a legitimate avenue for bridge building to bring the country together? That's a whole other separate question. Now it's a potential sign of an inability to make deals, to find ways to compromise, to come together for common goals, to achieve things with unity. So, more bad news. But let's take another break. When we come back, we'll continue conversation. Stay tuned. This is Talking About the WSN. We'll be right back after this.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded big ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also nationwide at Mart's Liquor Palace, Dingle Martin Main Road, Shamir, Uncle Beto, Santa Cruz, Better Deal Supermarket, Cunupia, and Aranguez, Khan's Liquor, Dingle Martin Main Road, Ramsing Sports, Chaguanas and Cuba, Bobby's Barbecue Wrap, Mirage Supermarket, Sangre Grande, West B Supermarket, Dingle Martin and Tacarigua, Sio's Bar, San Fernando, Payless Hardware, Dingle Martin Main Road, Don's Roti, Pitti Valley, Mirage Westside Arima, Western Pharmacy next to St. James Police. Also at islandetickets.com. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1082. Queens Royal College 3-car raffle.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics. Gather your family and tune in to WESN from December 1st to 31st at 8 p.m. nightly for We Christmas Movie Classics.
Santa's coming to town. Santa! Oh my God! Santa here? I know him. I know him.
Only on WESN, Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas, and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region.
Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
wanna-
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
All right, so the good lady is not able to make it, so we're going to have to switch gears, although there are some topics of discussion today that would have been pushed back otherwise, but we have now the chance to speak about them today. One of the first things, though, that it was starting to pile up once again is the situation, the crime situation in the country that was started to get me concerned. The first thing is, and the headline in The Guardian on this story, or the beginning of the headline, says it best, said what I was feeling. And this is not the first time I felt this way. Something is not right. This is a church leader response to a priest being robbed, right? So St. Benedict's RC Church in La Romaine, burglars broke into the presbytery, tied up and robbed the priest. It goes back to what I said before, because this is not the first time that essentially a holy site, a temple, a church, what have you, was robbed. But I think this might be one of the first times that they did it when a member of the clergy was there, or someone of the church or the temple was there, and part of what we have to now speculate is what happens if the gentleman, for whatever reason, decided to be violent. And it goes back to what I was saying, I guess, years ago, when robberies and vandalism of sacred ground occurred, like that Hindu temple, where children and elderly became victims of violence, and in the case of elderly, sexual assault and rape. Of course, the case of children, that's been something under the currents for quite some time. Mr. Digger Martin brings it up somewhat regularly, or semi-regularly over the last couple of years now, really. Things that we don't necessarily want to address, and maybe not addressing one aspect of assault, whether sexual or physical, or even potentially emotional abuse. Not addressing them cause the psyche to be more tolerable to the expansion. And now we're seeing how society chips away at itself slowly over time. Father Jason Grell, a priest in residence, you know, he is quoted to say this long ago: when you heard incidents like this, you would never think of going into a presbytery or into a church to steal or vandalize. That would be considered insane. You're crazy. It says to me that when you hear these incidents, there's a breakdown in family values. Because ultimately, that's one of the things, right? There are criminals, but even criminals at times might have limits in the States. You don't want anybody to know that you were incarcerated for anything to do with children. That's a very good way to get yourself beat, just because. Even though it's hard on gangsters, killers, criminals, drug dealers, and of course drugs harm communities in an insidious way like nothing else. To some extent, same thing with gambling. But you cross certain lines, even criminals in the States have limits, have standards. But now the question is, are we seeing these things being slowly eroded here? At one point in time, criminality was an illegal profession. Now, it seems more like a snatch and grab. Illegal profession in the sense of the criminals had certain skills, they had certain rules that they operated under, they had certain limits that they dared not cross. But now it seems as though all of that's out the window. And it's not just about the church being the victim, but rather it's a sign that as the values erode, what did I say? Tolerance of one or an inability to deal with one could then allow for it to be expanded elsewhere. In fact, this goes back to, if we're going to start threatening politicians now, at what point will threats turn into action? And then action turns into successful action, which, to put it another way, would be tragedy. Because it is a tragedy regardless of whether you believe in the individual who has the violence committed against them or not. Because it's not violence won't be limited to people who you dislike. At some point then it will go further, it will grow further, and then touch on people who you do support. And then what do we do? One of the things is, it's not as though churches, yes, churches have a certain amount, like any entity, of financial resources. Once you're not bankrupt, you're going to have some money, right? You got to live, you got to maintain the church, the priests have to survive, etc., etc. But I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but at least individual Catholic church, if you want to say the Vatican is wealthy, that's a whole different conversation. But the churches in Trinidad, at least for the Roman Catholic Church, ain't swimming in money. So as a target, they're not necessarily the best targets. Yeah, technically it's a better target than, say, a plywood shack. But, and this is one of the reasons why you look at the whole, is it a smash and grab mentality, whatever I could get. Because crime seemingly is not so much about trying to find a target where you could be rewarded for your risky behavior, for your illegal behavior. If you're going to break the law for a windfall. No, they're breaking the same laws, but on a much more frequent basis because it's done willy-nilly, whatever they could get. I don't know if maybe luxury or high-end residences and the domiciles of people with financial means, if they just know, hey, there's not actually a lot of cash to be had there, so why bother? It's too much effort to kind of steal furniture and appliances from houses like that. Why bother? The walls are too high, the security systems are too extensive. Why bother? But then you're going to prey on the most vulnerable, on the least expecting, and potentially at times those with the least means. Because I'll say this though, while it seems like there is some sort of smash and grab mentality, look at the whole Maxi situation. It's one thing to maybe hold up somebody, carjack somebody. They might have cash. Even if they don't have cash, the car has a certain value. Although, to be fair, there was a carjacking situation or a robbery and carjacking where the items that the individual was robbed of, they weren't returned, but the car was. The car was, I believe, at the bottom of the street. The keys were on the hood. So that's an interesting act. I don't necessarily think it's a trend. But there was another incident where someone was looking to pay. Let me get this story. There was a situation where someone was relieved of $100,000, looking to pay something at Board of Inland Revenue, taxes or the like. And the first thing I thought of when I saw that was, why did you have $100,000 in cash on you? Outstanding taxes on gaming machines on Monday. He was steps away from the Inland Revenue building, in full view of the security, which now we have to start a question, right? You come in, why, first of all, why do you need to pay cash outstanding taxes? Was this a requirement of the government, which is not an unreasonable question, but I'll still be surprised if the answer was yes? Or was this just because you thought, oh, well, I have the cash? And of course, like I said, in full view of the security, what is the value of the security then? As he was approaching the steps, a suspect grabbed the shopping bag containing $120,000 and ran off. And then when he chased the suspect, eventually he backed off when he saw the suspect enter a car where the driver was reaching for something, potentially a gun. And of course, the victim was basically on foot, so to what extent is he going to chase down a car anyway? That probably was targeted. Unless either they were staking out Board of Inland Revenue's building, or they were targeting that individual because it's gaming machines, so they know he's going to be in a high cash business. And for whatever reason, he thought, oh, I'm going to have $130,000. This, while it doesn't necessarily, it's not the same situation with regards to people who take cash for transactions on online marketplaces. It is a situation where I am sure the TTPS would basically say, not necessarily officially, but unofficially, why did you do that? Please do not do it again, ever. Ever. I mean, at that point, if you have that much cash lying around, spend a little bit more, higher security guard, I don't know. So there is some criminal elements that they're doing their darnest to get big scores potentially. We know that they case the banks. Are they casing government buildings too? I don't know. At some point, if the government wants us to transition to a digital economy, they have to lead the way and get rid of all of these cash transactions, particularly transactions that are not necessarily to the general public. Why are you having, I mean, again, I don't expect this to be the case where he had to pay taxes on game machines and cash, but I would go so far as to say the government should, as a policy, say, no, you cannot come with cash, because what's going to happen is you're going to break a whole set of cash. And that leads to a lot of issues with regards to accounting, chain of custody, with regards to potentially you being robbed on your way here. Because the government wants its money now. What the government going to do if the money gets robbed? And the person can't earn the money. You could penalize the individual all you want. That's a whole other questionable situation with regards to the ethics of it all. That doesn't mean that he could conjure another $130,000 to pay his outstanding taxes now. Something is not right. And the thing, going back to the church, there was apparently security. 5 men dressed in dark clothing, wearing masks and gloves. This was all this was not a spur of the moment thing. They incapacitated the security guard, and then they disconnected the TNTech meter box. They broke down the front door, ransacked the office, then went to the priest quarters. incapacitated the police. I guess because churches collect money via cash, they probably thought, hey, it's a cash situation. How much money they got, who knows? But this is where we reach. The flip side is the PCA is still complaining about the lack of body camera footage. Right? There's a report that says police-involved killings have totaled 54 up to November the 23rd. But then they went on to say that overall it's 67. So I'm not entirely sure how 3 days made such a big difference. The question is, are we okay with that? The crime potentially could get out of control, right? Cool. Do we just want to tell the police, do whatever you have to do to keep it under control? Because the implications of not necessarily having enough to prove proactively that everything is on the up and up. Think about it, right? We essentially, and I'm not saying that it's wrong for us to do this, but think about it. We assume that the police, whenever there's a police-involved shooting, we are being asked to assume that it was a just shooting. We're not willing to assume that what the Americans are doing is correct. But on the bare basic principle of it, we're being asked to do so with regards to our own TTPS. It's not exactly the same situation, but the principle is more or less the same. We don't get to see any sort of timely evidence or explanation as to why these various shootings are justified, despite the fact that complaints are being made to the PCA. And the PCA is basically saying, we don't get any body camera footage either. And part of it is, and maybe people won't trust the PCA if you did it this way, but at the very least, can't the PCA see the footage? And then come back and tell us, well, we saw the footage, X, Y, and Z. There was a situation in the States. In the States, recently, there was an off-duty police officer was in a traffic accident with another individual, right? The police officer, I believe, was not in the wrong in the traffic accident, first off. And then, for whatever reason, the young man decided to start shooting at the off-duty police officer who fired back. And the young man was killed. And the family initially was enraged. But what their local authorities did was they contacted them, brought them into a police station, sat them down, spoke to them in a respectful manner, showed them the footage. They treated them like humans. And then the family came back and responded by saying, we got it wrong. The off-duty police officer was not in the wrong. They got an upfront explanation, went in front of the cameras, and they basically said, unfortunately, our family member was in the wrong. And it nipped all of the anger that was surging in the moment in the bud. But we don't do that here. So this is why, I know not a lot of people see it this way, but I draw a lot of parallels with regards to how we view our local situation to the international situation. Because on principle, it's not to the same severity, in a way, at least, although at the end of the day you could argue both lead to death. It's obviously not the same level of violence, firearms versus a high explosive device. But the basic principles of, well, we're not necessarily seeing evidence to prove these things to be on the up and up. And the fact that the police seemingly is deprioritizing the capacity to get that evidence, you might as well just be like the Americans and just say nothing. You don't care to say anything, what's the point? Which leads me to the next topic. The situation with America is now that there have been a couple of high-end meetings in the region on security. And of course, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of States met with the Prime Minister at the diplomatic center. The reporter, he flew in an Air Force jet, went to the U.S. Embassy by the Savannah, went to the diplomatic center, had a meeting for a couple of hours, and then at some point, they had doubles, and then he left. Now, here's the thing. The long and short is this. Some people are basically saying they want more transparency. I believe one of them is the opposition chief whip, Marvin Gonzalez. What was discussed in the high-end meeting? There are speculations and maybe even anonymous sources that say it's not just about transnational crime and drug smuggling. Officially, that's what the meeting was about. And I'm basically going to say this. I expect the meeting was more about just drug smuggling. I expect the meeting might have also not necessarily told the Prime Minister about the U.S. intentions with regards to Venezuela, but it could have been about Venezuela, about Nicolas Maduro, about the government of Venezuela. It could have been perhaps discussions to kind of feel each other out, or it could have been outright just revealing intentions. I don't necessarily know. What I do know is this. This will not be the first time a U.S. official meets with the head of state or a senior official of another government. They have a meeting and they tell us, this is what we talked about. And it's all benign, but what they really went for was something more specific that they don't want the public to know. And at the end of the day, this is not wrong. On some level, security considerations have to be upheld. You don't want to just reveal sensitive information like that willy-nilly. First of all, whatever they said in the meeting, it does not necessarily mean it will come to pass. The Americans can't pack up everything and go home. I believe it's unlikely, right? But I also don't think that this meeting is a clear sign. This meeting is very neutral to me. It has nothing to do with whether the Americans are going to attack Venezuela or go after Nicolas Maduro or not. Because the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff could have come down here to tell the Prime Minister, no, we're not going to do it. Or he could have come down here to tell the Prime Minister, yes, we are going to do it. Either way, he comes down here. Him coming here is not an indicator. And no, we do not necessarily have a right to hear everything that was said. What you do is you give a plausible reason as to why you have the meeting, and we just, to some extent, have to accept it. That is the gamesmanship, because now we are going from the realm of international diplomacy to international espionage. That is strategic information that our government and the American government don't want out, as far as I'm aware. Right? So, I'm not bothered by it. You don't have to agree with it. I'm just not bothered by it. This is something that has been done time immemorial. It's just that we are not accustomed to being one of the players in the situation. And we are a player. You could say we're a minor player. You could say we're a major player. But when the secretary, I believe the Secretary of State or the Vice President, has our name at the forefront of his mind as an example with regards to crime situation and murder statistics, they're looking at this Venezuelan situation and they're looking at not just, oh, Nicolas Maduro, but they're looking at all of the totality of the effect on the region, on the neighbors. Whether it justifies their actions or not is a whole separate debate. They are aware. You could argue they are exploiting the fact that we have major issues with Venezuela because we face consequences of what's going on in Venezuela right now. And they're basically saying, you see, let's be friends because we have not necessarily the same agenda, but our agendas are parallel. Because as Karen said more than once in the past, and I have said, at the end of the day, we want the foreign help. Not necessarily in this way, but we want the foreign help. And now the Prime Minister, she seemingly is of that same mind. She wants the foreign help. Because the crime situation is bigger than us. One of the unfortunate things that we don't speak a lot of on this show, because there isn't much to say, it seems fairly obvious, and also it comes a certain level of risk, to be honest. What is the strategy to go after the actual drug lords in the country? Think about that. Because we lament the fact that we only get the street level criminals. But we don't necessarily actually have the discussions on the difficulties of going after such well-connected people. And that's all I'll say about that. This whole thing kind of bypasses that question. At the end of the day, if you take the money out of drug smuggling, out of the drug trade, all of a sudden, the math is different. And perhaps maybe that's what the Prime Minister's after. Not necessarily that she's endorsing the way it's being done, but she wants the equation on our overall crime situation to change, and this changes the equation. This changes the variables. This allows certain actions that might have been ineffective before to now be more effective. This allows for certain strategies that might have been insignificant before to now be significant. Maybe. And perhaps that's part of the meeting too. Part of the meeting probably was about transnational crime. 2 years ago, the head of Southern Command spoke about international drug smuggling in the region and what that affected. That was a security concern of the US military. Years before that, there were talks about the US military intervening with regards to the Mexican drug trade and human trafficking, going after the cartels. Although that was seen, I believe, while the conversations were had and the rumors were there, it was always seen as that's going too far and it probably won't be allowed. Now that they're actually doing it in a very controversial way, however, in the Southern Caribbean, what is our government supposed to do? It's not as though the Prime Minister could stop the Americans. It's not as though she's endorsing the killings. But perhaps at the end of the day, it is timing the drug trade. Our individual agenda of needing to deal with our crime problem, perhaps for us, should trump whatever the international concerns are. Of course, that runs with big risks, because escalation does not just come from they go after Maduro and they leave a power vacuum. Escalation could come in other ways and forms. While I don't think it's likely to happen, there is no zero risk in anything when it comes to things of this nature and of this level. While I don't think that our fishermen are at great risk of being shot at mistakenly, that doesn't mean that the chances are zero. That doesn't mean that there isn't risk to the personal safety of people in Trinidad and Tobago in various ways. The Americans technically escalated a thing. The drug cartels might find other ways to escalate in response, and we might be in that firing line. All right, we're running out of time. We have to close early. Technically, we'll open up the phone lines. We could take maybe 1 or 2 calls real quick, but there is a comment, and I want to take the comment now if we can. Can the 10% payment to public servants be paid partly in interest-bearing bonds that could be retained or sold on the open market? Can that be a solution to the embassy? Maybe, because then, and I'm not a financial guy, so this is very much layman's understanding and limited understanding. But what essentially that could allow you to do is kick the can down the road, which normally is a bad thing, but given the fact that we have certain expectations on development of new gas revenues to come on stream in a couple of years, certain fields to the southeast, right, near the, not hibiscus, that's dragon, but it's not just ginger, fields around ginger. Besides manatee and coquina mannequin and manatee are potentially coming on stream, and they will bolster our revenue position as well as our foreign exchange position. So we might be in a better position to service these bonds. The flip side to that is how much foreign debt are we currently carrying? What is the timeline for repaying that debt, and will anything like this potentially, be an issue? This might not be in foreign currency. This could be in local currency, but then you have to look at the foreign debt and the local debt. To what extent do we want to incur more debt and more risk, right? So possibly, but I think I'm not too sure if the government could just, can they unilaterally just decide it? I guess they can, right? But usually when the previous administration did that, that would have been around the mid-year budget review to deal with the need to deal with the higher deficits. Because based on the budgets, initially the deficit was not budgeted to be so big. I don't want to say expected, because one could argue maybe they did expect the budget to be high, but they did accounting tricks to report it as low, which is, I suspect, a similar case, maybe different tricks, maybe different processes that the current administration did to keep their stated budget position looking somewhat better than the PNM's past couple of budgets. And not budgeting anything for the PSA is potentially one of them, right? Didn't really make sense to me, because you're expecting to spend money this year, but you didn't do it. So again, because here's the problem. Do you want to go into debt to pay salaries? Because you could use bonds to finance the 10%, but are you doing that for the back pay? Or are you doing that for the recurring expenditure? Because at some point, that the money you get from those bonds, it's gonna be spent. What do you do for then whatever that point is, the next year's salary increase to finance it? That's one of the reasons why it's not necessarily, maybe for the back pay, maybe you clear for the back pay, but you still need to try to figure out how you're gonna get just the 10% to increase salaries year on year moving forward, this year and moving forward. We have Sanford on the line. Good morning, caller, you're on air.
Morning, Sean. You know, I was hoping Karen would have been here this morning to go back, and I was not going to call, but I see you came and started it with this comment on the what you call it, on that 10%.
Yeah.
And I wanted to expand on something that Karen seemed not to understand where I was coming from last week, so I wanted to break it down for her. So I'll do it quickly for you.
Right.
Presently, right? Our reserves, our proven reserves is about 11.5 TCF, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's our proven reserves. It does not matter what comes, all the ginger, the sip, including the manatee side of all of that is included in this 10.5, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it has not been brought. They have not been brought into production as yet.
Yeah.
So even if when they come into production, what will happen is that we have an increase in production. So we'll be getting more gas, but it does not change what we have as proven reserves, right?
Right.
So what will happen is we're going to be extracting more from the pool that we have.
Yes.
So, and that is what I was trying to get at with her. So what is going to happen here is that we're going to be extracting more. So the pool is going to get the pond is going to get empty faster.
Right.
Because because our what do you call it? Because it's three is the proven reserves or the proved reserves and the possible and the probable. The possible is only 4.9 TCF, and the probable is 5 TCF. So you see how small the figures are. So until we have some big finds, so because we have in this bid round here we had two bidders, the Chinese National Oil Company and there was a consortium, and those were only 4 of the blocks that they took out of the 20 that were up for bid there, only 4. Now, so we are in a precarious position because unless we find much more gas, and that is where I differ from Karen when we spoke about the issue with Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
That Dragon feed had 20 ECF, 20. And they were already in negotiations for the Lawrence side of the Laurel Manatee, which is another 10 TCF. So that would be 30 TCF if we had signed the contract for the Lawrence side, because we already signed the contract for the Manatee side. I mean for the Dragon, sorry. And so until, even though we extract now, we're going to get more money in the short term. This only represents 10 years at most, Sean.
Right.
This only represents 10 years at most. Because right now, we're extracting about 0.98 TCF, 0.98. Once we increase production, we're going to go over 1 point something. And what's going to happen is, as I said, so instead of moving from 10 years, we're going to move to probably, 8 years of proven reserves left. So we are in a precarious position. Hopefully, that arrangement we signed with ExxonMobil going to come to fruition, and they're going to find something out there. However, I think it's time we look at getting arrangements where we have to start to purchase LNG for our capacities locally. Purchase LNG, because to keep our industries running, we're going to need gas.
Yeah.
And so and this is apart from our diversification, which in when you look back in retrospect, we have had a very, very poor rate of diversification. So until that is stepped up, we have to look at purchasing LNG for our needs in Trinidad and Tobago to put through the system. Have a good day, Sean.
Thanks, caller. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Now, to me, usually when I speak about it, I'm just thinking about, I get it. And the long-run prospects is potentially being sacrificed for the short-run gain. But I am thinking, when I spoke about it today in particular, it's just literally about the increased immediate revenue, cash flow, liquidity, in order to meet with this immediate problem of this 10% thing. And again, and that could be why the government is hesitating on 10%. It's not so simple to go into government bonds and stuff. One of the things we have to remember is, at least with regards to the Americans, they print money. They just print money to get themselves out of it. That's one of the benefits of their large manufacturing base. Well, they used to have a large manufacturing base, but their large service industry, financial sector, their technological achievements, etc., and the fact that, and Karen was here to talk again further about de-dollarization, which I think is also with regards to control of natural resources globally. But the fact that the American dollar was kind of being propped up by the fact that it was the global currency of choice. The flip side is, if de-dollarization occurs, it actually might make American manufacturing more competitive, more practical, and it might shift. America's response might be to shift how their financial strength, or where they gain their influence and financial power, the strength of the economy, to meet the changing global trends or patterns. So I get it. I get where you're coming from. Is 8 years enough to diversify? Well, here's the thing. Here's the funny thing. The government's revitalization plan, I don't think it's going to transform the economy. Now, it will help transform the country, and it will do positive things to the economy, but will it diversify the economy to get us ready for life after oil and gas? Probably not. The amount of projects are not on that level to transform the whole economy. I would hazard a guess. They haven't necessarily said anything with regards to Tobago, and there could be a lot more stuff with tourism in Tobago. That's number one. But even then, as Dr. Sajiwan said, tourism isn't going to replace oil and gas. Oil and gas is a juggernaut that no one industry is going to replace. They have not spoken a lot about, in regards to the revitalization plan, agriculture and food security. Right? They also have not spoken a lot about manufacturing per se. What they would plan to do with C-lots would be maybe light manufacturing, but it seems to be more like a warehouse and distribution center for the private sector to be in conjunction with the new artificial island that they want to build the port on off the coast of C-lots, right? So yes, medical tourism, medical education. There's a 200+ room hotel in San Fernando. That's not diversifying the economy to the level of replacing oil and gas. And it's a 10-year plan. And there will be private interests, so it's not like we will experience all the gains. We're not taking on all the risks. So you raise a good point, Mr. San Fernando, with regards to the long-term situations. Ironically, I said you could maybe finance some part of the 10%, maybe the back pay with bonds, but you're kicking the problem down the road, which might not be a bad thing if we have better revenues down the road. But depending on when those bonds mature, maybe the timing doesn't work out that conveniently enough. But by potentially taking away from our proven reserves, we are kicking the long-term economic health problem. We're kind of, we're kicking our revenue problem down the road because we're taking, according to Mr. San Fernando, and he could be very right, we're basically eating into our reserves faster. And this is the thing with oil and gas. This is why I don't necessarily understand what Russia is doing, economically speaking, selling oil at a discounted rate to China and India, because these are things that you're not going to get back. Now, do they have that much reserves? I don't know. But we don't. We know we don't. So now that comes into play. Do we need the Venezuelan gas? If we have to import gas, financially that is still going to be better than not if our gas runs out. But that would mean that the available foreign exchange and the revenue levels or the profit levels off of the endeavor will be much more reduced for us because we'll have to be spending foreign exchange for that. And that will add extra costs, higher costs to get the LNG in order to keep feeding our downstream industries, right? But perhaps maybe what we should have done was figure out a way to grow these industries and just make it so that, look, we're a one-stop shop. We buy the LNG and we produce all these things and we just make it so streamlined and efficient that it makes sense for people to sell us the LNG rather than do it themselves. You know, it just all depends on what competitive advantages you could find, what incentives you could have, not incentives that you compromise on, but that you could build in from your geographic or production advantages and the like. The logistical advantages, the efficiency advantages. Did we do that enough? Maybe, maybe not. It's a hell of a thing when the NGC chairman has to say, well, it's a good thing Nutrien shut down. We have more gas for everybody else. Really? Don't say things like that, please. Even if you're kind of doing it in a way that is trying to be respectful, it never comes across very well. People read the headlines and they're going to take it the wrong way. Let's just take the last comment and we have to go. We have to commend them when they don't kill. I agree with this. I agree with this, the idea of this, but I know on a practical level, if you're talking about when they shoot at people and they don't kill, that is not something that can be counted on. Marksmanship with handguns is not really a thing, particularly once you get at certain ranges, right? And marksmanship when people's lives are being threatened. No one is taught to shoot people in the leg, in part because you could still kill someone shooting them in the leg, but also in part because it is a lot harder hitting someone in the leg, especially when somebody decides to engage the police in a gunfight. Unless they're standing in the open, most likely a significant amount of them is under some kind of cover, whether behind a wall, whether they're peeking up over the wall or next to the wall. And unfortunately, in those situations, when they decide, I'm going to take shots at the police, or at least I'm going to point a gun at the police, your upper body is what's going to be exposed. So if the police shoot back, the thing is, what if they just shoot to miss, then the longer the gunfight goes on, the greater the chances that somebody, not a criminal, is going to be hit. It could be a civilian. This is one of the things that I believe either Ashraf, Arun, or Inspector Kate Simon spoke to me off air about. The police also have to consider, if criminals are shooting bullets, where are those bullets going? If they miss me, they could hit someone behind me. That could be a civilian. So to allow the situation to go on long saying, well, we have the situation under control, they could just shoot willy-nilly. No, that's not a thing. So it's not that easy to wound someone in a firefight. Soldiers, special forces soldiers, police officers, SWAT officers, etc., you're trained to shoot for hair. It's the largest target. It's the fastest way to incapacitate a target. Even headshots, that's more of a Hollywood thing than an actual practical thing, right? You have to be a high-end sniper-trained special ops soldier to say, yeah, we're going to go for headshots. That's not a thing that soldiers generally just do. Because it's a smaller target, it's not as easy to hit. When you're aiming at a silhouette, you aim for the middle of the silhouette because you're in a gunfight and you're trying to accomplish something. That is to say, stop the other guy from shooting bullets. This is why the body cameras are important. So yes, if they don't kill, here's the thing with the statement. We have to commend them for situations where they can arrest perpetrators or de-escalate situations without the need for shooting. The question is, there's those judgment calls where, hey, did you point a gun at the cops? Because if you did, don't be surprised that they shoot you. In one case, one of the police shootings this week, the person was injured, either this week or over the weekend. Right? But that's more of a unintended benefit than something that you could teach to be an intentional result. So we should commend the police when they de-escalate the situation. The problem is these confrontations, we, the public, don't know if they had an opportunity to de-escalate or if the criminal was hell-bent on violence. We don't know. That's why we need the body cam footage, because the body cam footage could show us those times. They could show us those times when the police did their job to the best of their ability, did all that we could ask them to, and regardless of the outcome, if they did their job to the best of their ability, everything and anything we could ask for, showing full respect for the lives, not just of potential civilians in the area, but even the criminals themselves. Yeah, we should commend them for that. But unfortunately, we don't actually see anything, so we can't. Police is one of the worst when it comes to actually showing when things go right, because they are too concerned about keeping secret when things go wrong. All right, short show today. Thanks to the caller, thanks to the commenters. We wait and see. I, like everybody else, as I said before, I don't like this whole waiting to see what the Americans are going to do, because it is stressful. But unfortunately, that's the situation we live in. Until then, stay safe. Please, I don't know if I need to say this every day, but please, to reiterate the point of one of the stories earlier, do not walk around with large amounts of cash. And large amounts of cash to me is once you reach into the $1,000 range, right? Okay, maybe a couple hundred is not a lot for you, but 900, 1,000, 4,000, 10,000, 200,000, just don't do it. I know people don't want to trust banks, but this is not the time to be walking around with large amounts of cash. And usually what happens is large amounts of cash is relative, but usually the victims get robbed of what large amounts of cash means for them. So please don't do it. Stay safe. Be your brother's keeper. If you see anything suspicious going on, report it. Help out your neighbor, your members of the community. Don't be afraid to stand up for each other, because if you don't stand up for each other, then that basically means no one will stand up for you. Remember your allegiance to the Republic and to each other. Don't forget, it's nice to be nice. We'll see each other, God willing, tomorrow. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Win a brand new ride for Christmas in a 3-car raffle organized on behalf of Queens Royal College. Merry Christmas! First prize is a luxurious, fully loaded big ride Ford Ranger. Draw date Saturday, December 20th at the school. Tickets only $100. All proceeds for the further uplifting of the school. Tickets available from teachers, parents, alumni, and of the school. Also nationwide at all branches of True Value, Reliable Appliances, Christina Shoe Store, Kenny Sports, Unique Bookstore, Extra Foods, JTA Supermarkets, Police Credit Union, ABC Home Center, The Trinity Shop, PRW Enterprises, Sharon Bookstores, Miguel Dale Moses and Sons, Ishmael Khan and Sons, Modern Electrical, Crosby St. James, Attorleys by the Park, Tribe, Mass Carnival, Cinnamon Drugs Sangre Grande, Felipe Truck San Fernando, Ronnie and Carol Maraval Road, IslandEtickets.com. For more info, call the college at 622-1671 or the hotline at 491-1802. Queens Royal College, 3-car raffle.
It's Christmas time, and with your family you'll spend every evening watching a movie on WESN. The classics that fill your heart with merriment and cheer as we celebrate together the most wonderful time of the year.
This is my island in December.
This Christmas, WESN celebrates with you as the content capital brings the big screen classics.